comment below where you're watching from and what time it is right now. You're about to hear how one man's grief nearly killed 83 innocent people in the most terrifying way imaginable. Picture this. You're buckled into seat 14A, sipping your complimentary peanuts, when suddenly the engines go silent. Dead silent. The plane starts dropping like a stone, and in that moment of pure terror, you realize someone in the cockpit just tried to murder everyone on board. His name was Marcus Chen. Marcus had calloused hands from years gripping flight controls, laugh lines around his eyes from countless conversations with co-pilots, and a small scar on his left temple from a childhood bike accident. He wore his uniform with pride, the crisp white shirt, the gold wings pinned perfectly straight, shoes polished to mirror shine. But on this October morning, as autumn light filtered through the cockpit windows casting long shadows across the instrument panel, Marcus was about to become something no one saw coming. 3 years earlier, Marcus had received a phone call that shattered his world like glass hitting concrete. His brother David had collapsed in his driveway, clutching his chest, the morning dew still wet on the grass around him. David wasn't just Marcus's brother. He was his anchor, his midnight phone call when flights got delayed, his fishing buddy who knew every secret Marcus had ever carried. They'd grown up sharing a bunk bed, whispering plans in the dark about becoming pilots together. The funeral was held on a Tuesday. Rain drummed against the church windows while Marcus stared at the mahogany casket, his pilot's uniform feeling suddenly too tight around his throat. Marcus tried to fly through the grief like turbulence. Just keep steady. Wait for clear skies. But grief doesn't follow flight plans. The bottles started small. A beer after long flights became 2 beers. 2 became 4. 4 became whiskey neat, the amber liquid burning away the phantom sound of David's laughter echoing in empty hotel rooms. His wife Sarah watched him disappear one drink at a time. Sarah, with her worried green eyes and the way she twisted her wedding ring when she was thinking. "Marcus," she said one evening, her voice soft as cotton but sharp as steel, "you're drowning on dry land." The therapist's office smelled like vanilla candles and broken dreams. Dr. Martinez, a woman with kind hands and a voice like warm honey, delivered the verdict. "You need medication. Clinical depression this severe won't just resolve on its own." But here's where the system revealed its cruelest joke. Take the pills, lose your wings. Stay sick, keep flying. Choose healing or choose your livelihood, but never both. Marcus felt the trap closing around him like turbulence you can't fly out of. 22 years of perfect flight records, thousands of safe landings, millions of miles without incident, all worthless if he admitted his mind was broken. So he chose the sky and let his soul crash instead. Fast forward 18 months. Sarah had given him an ultimatum wrapped in love. Get help or I'm gone. The anniversary of David's death approached like storm clouds on radar. Marcus flew to Seattle, where the Space Needle pierced low-hanging clouds and the sound of ferry horns echoed across Puget Sound. David's college friends had organized a memorial weekend, and Marcus needed to be there, needed to feel close to his brother's memory one more time. The cabin they rented overlooked the water. Pine trees swayed in the October wind, and the air tasted like salt and rain. They shared stories, drank too much wine, and laughed until their sides ached. Then Tommy, David's old roommate with a mischievous grin and pockets full of questionable ideas, produced a small bag of mushrooms. "David would have wanted us to see the world the way he did," Tommy said, his eyes bright with unshed tears. Full of magic. Marcus had never touched psychedelics, never even smoked weed. But grief makes you desperate for any door out of pain, and he was so tired of hurting. The mushrooms tasted like dirt and regret. For hours, the world became liquid gold. Colors bled into sounds, and Marcus swore he could hear David's voice in the wind chimes on the cabin's porch. He felt connected to everything, the trees, the water, the universe itself. He stayed awake for 36 hours, riding waves of euphoria and terror, watching sunrise paint the mountains purple and pink. 2 days later, Marcus stood in Seattle-Tacoma Airport, his eyes bloodshot, his hands still trembling slightly. His reflection in the bathroom mirror looked like a stranger, hollow cheeks, pupils still dilated, stubble shadowing his jaw. He wasn't flying this flight, just deadheading home to Phoenix in the cockpit jump seat, the small fold-down chair where off-duty pilots catch free rides. Standard procedure. Routine. Except nothing about Marcus was routine anymore. The mushrooms were supposed to be gone from his system. Supposed to. But as the Boeing 737 lifted off the runway, climbing through scattered clouds into brilliant blue sky, Marcus felt reality start to bend again. The cockpit smelled like coffee and leather. Sunlight streamed through the windscreen, casting everything in harsh, clinical white. The engines hummed their familiar song, a sound Marcus had heard thousands of times, comforting as a lullaby. But now that hum sounded wrong, sinister, like mechanical predators stalking through the sky. Captain Rodriguez and First Officer Kim were talking about weather patterns ahead, their voices becoming distant and echo-y, like hearing conversations through water. Marcus gripped the armrests of his jump seat, feeling the metal dig into his palms. Then the delusion hit like a sledgehammer to the skull. The men in the pilot seats weren't pilots anymore. They were actors, imposters. This whole flight was an elaborate simulation, a test, a nightmare he couldn't escape. Marcus's heart hammered against his ribs like a caged bird. His breathing came in short, sharp gasps that fogged the jump seat's tiny window. The airplane felt like a metal coffin hurtling through space, and he was trapped inside forever. He looked up at the ceiling and saw them. 2 red T-handles, bright as blood against the gray panel. Engine fire suppression handles. In an emergency, pulling them would cut fuel flow to both engines. But in Marcus's fractured mind, they looked like escape hatches. Wake-up buttons. The only way out of this endless, mechanical hell. Marcus stood up. His legs felt like water, but determination flooded through him. He had to wake up. Had to end this simulation. His fingers wrapped around the cold metal handles. "This isn't real," he whispered and pulled. The effect was immediate. Warning lights exploded across the instrument panel like angry red stars. Alarms shrieked. The engines began to die. Captain Rodriguez spun around, his face white as paper. What the hell? Both pilots lunged at Marcus, grabbing his arms, wrestling him away from the controls. Rodriguez slammed the handles back into position, his movements precise despite the chaos. Fuel flow restored. Engines spooled back to life. The airplane shuddered, but kept flying. The moment Captain Rodriguez's hands touched his shoulders, something shifted in Marcus's brain. The human contact, warm, real, urgent, pierced through the delusion like sunlight through storm clouds. The cockpit snapped back into focus. The pilots weren't actors. The plane wasn't a simulation. This was real. Terrifyingly, devastatingly real. "Oh God," Marcus whispered, stumbling backward. "Oh God, what did I do?" Marcus fled the cockpit, his heart racing, his mind still fractured, but now aware of the horror he'd almost caused. He collapsed into a flight attendant's jump seat in the rear galley, his whole body shaking. Flight attendant Jennifer Walsh, a woman with kind brown eyes and 15 years of experience talking down drunk passengers, approached cautiously. "Sir, are you okay?" "Handcuff me," Marcus gasped. "Restrain me. This is going to get worse." Jennifer exchanged glances with her colleague, then retrieved flex cuffs from the emergency kit. The plastic zip ties bit into Marcus's wrists, but the physical restraint felt like salvation. But the nightmare wasn't over. The coffee in the galley smelled rich and dark, like safety, like normalcy. Marcus grabbed the entire pot with his restrained hands and drank directly from it, the hot liquid scalding his throat, grounding him in sensation that felt real. The flight attendants watched in horror as this uniformed pilot, someone they should trust absolutely, gulped coffee like a man dying of thirst. Then Marcus's gaze fell on the emergency exit door. In his fractured state, it looked like freedom, like the final escape from this mechanical prison hurtling through space. Jump out, fall through clouds, wake up in his own bed safe and sound. He lunged toward the door handle. Jennifer and her colleague moved like dancers, gentle but firm, guiding Marcus's hands away from the emergency exit. They didn't shout or panic. Instead, they talked to him like he was a frightened child. "Hey, let's just sit down and talk," Jennifer said, her voice steady as stone. "Tell me about your family." Up front, Captain Rodriguez was already requesting emergency clearance to Portland, his voice calm but urgent over the radio. "We have a medical emergency on board. Request immediate diversion." Portland International Airport came into view through scattered clouds. The runway stretched ahead like a lifeline. Marcus sat in his jump seat, flex cuffs cutting into his wrists, watching the ground rise to meet them. The landing was smooth, Rodriguez's hands steady despite everything. As the plane rolled to the gate, Marcus could see police cars and emergency vehicles waiting like sharks circling prey. The door opened. Officers in tactical gear boarded, their radios crackling with coded language Marcus understood all too well. "Marcus Chen." "That's me," he said quietly. The handcuffs were cold against his wrists, heavier than the flex cuffs. More real. The charges hit like a freight train. 83 counts of attempted murder. One for every soul on board. Reckless endangerment. His pilot's license suspended indefinitely. The mugshot showed a man who looked nothing like the confident pilot who'd earned his wings 22 years earlier. Hollow eyes. Stubble. The uniform replaced by orange jail scrubs. But here's what the headlines missed. Marcus got clean. Really clean. He and Sarah started a nonprofit, Pilots for Mental Health, advocating for policy changes that would let aviators seek treatment without losing their careers. The federal attempted murder charges were eventually dropped. Prosecutors recognized what defense attorneys argued. This wasn't malicious intent, but severe mental health crisis exacerbated by policy failures. But as of today, Marcus Chen still faces state charges, still fights to reclaim some version of the life grief, and an impossible system destroyed. The scariest part? He's not the only pilot suffering in silence, choosing between healing and flying, praying their demons don't manifest at 35,000 feet with innocent lives in the balance. Next time you board a plane, remember Marcus's story. Remember that the person in the cockpit is human, carrying grief and pain just like you. And maybe, just maybe, that understanding will help us build systems that heal instead of hide, that support instead of shame. Because none of us should have to choose between getting help and keeping our dreams alive.